I want to talk now about what I would call the anti-empiricism of statism. Now, as an Austrian or a proponent of the Austrian school of economics, a lot of times you will get accused of eschewing science and eschewing um, empiricism, and that is at least partially true with Austrian economics. However, it's kind of an unfair criticism, but beyond that, there are lots of libertarians who are not Austrian economics proponents and who don't come to libertarianism thanks to Austrian economics. And the claim that it's just often alleged that libertarians are anti-science, anti-empirical. They're just dogmatic. This is basically almost never true. I know in my case, I wasn't a statist, and then I sat down and said, I'm going to do deductive reasoning to see whether, we should have a government or not. With me, it was looking at every individual issue over the years and going, okay, does the war on drugs work? Does gun control work? Does Social Security work? And looking at the arguments and looking at the data, comparing different countries. And basically, I was already a committed libertarian before I'd ever even heard of the Austrian school or studied it at all or gone into deductive reasoning even a little bit. And as far as I can tell, this seems to be the case with almost all libertarians. Very few just one day thought, just started thinking really hard, and I'm going to deduct the role of state in society. Almost all of them began they were probably tipped off by some kind of anecdotal piece of evidence. They saw somebody or some situation that was aggravated by a government policy, and then they probably examined that policy or similar policies and came to the conclusion that they were counterproductive, or at least failed to do what they purported. And that's what happened with me. That's what happens with most people. It's interesting because when you debate statists about particular programs, Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid, it's pretty clear that they are the anti-empirical ones. Because I feel comfortable coming into the stances I have either deductively or empirically. I don't think that there's a contradiction there. I think that they lead to the same conclusions. And I've taken the time to look at it from both ends. And when I debate people, I can usually pick and choose which one I think is going to be the better method to convince them. And so you can point out all the empirical problems, say, with the welfare state. You could say, well, the welfare state has actually increased poverty. Poverty was going down prior to the institution of the Great Society. Since then, the amount of poverty has actually increased. There are theoretical reasons why this would be. You can point all this out. And the retort is never going to be a scientific one. They're never going to be empirical. What they will probably do is they will cite either a hypothetical example or a personal example that they know, either of which is anecdotal, and then that will be proof. They will consider that to be proof that a program is acceptable and is worthwhile. So you can, for Social Security, it's so easy to show how it's a scam, how it's a Ponzi scheme, how it won't work in the long run, how it's not even really working now. And they can say, well, I had a grandma and she didn't have a job and her husband died and she got money. She benefited, hence the program is justified. And empirically, you could come and say, well, hey, what about, I mean, even if your grandma did receive a benefit, you're ignoring the fact that there was a cost to that. You know, young people at work are poorer and will be poorer for the rest of their lives because they have to pay, you know, for that. And you're just to completely ignore that, to not even bring that onto the table when you're considering the efficacy of something, is grossly unscientific. You know, it'd be like if we did a medical trial, if we were trying to look for a cure for cancer, and you know, we gave the cure to somebody, and their cancer died, but they had heart failure because of the drug, and then say, well, the drug is good, the drug works, it cured cancer. Well, yeah, and it killed the patient anyway. So the you know, and it just strikes me as so odd that we get, you know, we can be called anti-empirical when basically the one leg that statists almost always resort to is an anecdotal one or an emotive one. Like, even if they can't think of an anecdotal evidence, I don't know how many times I've been just told by people, I don't care, it makes me feel good. I've had extensive debates on healthcare where, you know, I've written pages and pages and pages, and oh, look at how the government raises the price, and how, you know, and at the end I'll even get them to admit that they can't critique anything that I've said, that they can't refute any of it, that it is logical and it seems true, and then at the end they just say, well, it doesn't matter, it makes me feel good to think that that's going to happen. Okay, so who's being anti-empirical? And then the other real obvious way is just their general view of the beneficence of government. You know, when you make arguments that the state should run healthcare, or the state should run education, or the state should run pension programs, implicit in all of those assertions is the idea that the government is willing and able to run those things, and that the motivation of politicians and bureaucrats is to help others, that they're altruistic, that they're selfless, and on top of being that they're also omniscient, that they have not necessarily all knowledge, but more knowledge than anybody else in society, many orders of magnitude more. And these implicit assumptions, that are loaded into all statist arguments, are baloney. Everybody knows. It's like it's weird. It seems like everybody realizes that almost all politicians are pathological liars, that they're power hungry, that they're conceited, you know, that they're elitist. And yet people who will readily admit that will then go on to say, well, you know, these people should have a greater control of our life, or they advocate that they control certain parts of the economy, or, you know, whatever. And that's you don't need deductive reasoning to realize that's retarded. You know, it's one thing to think of an institution, or to come up with a policy and to really think it out, and dot all your I's and cross all your T's and really lay it out, you know, and have a compelling cross-sectional plan. But if your plan is, well, the government will just do it, and then you don't even flesh out, well, how is the even government capable of doing that? Is that even possible? You know, is free healthcare even possible? I mean, how many times have you heard someone say you need free healthcare or free education? How is that possible? The doctors have to be paid, right? The buildings have to be heated and built and maintained. None of that is free. The only way that would be free is if all the people who provided those goods and services were slaves, and even then it wouldn't be free because you'd have to feed them. And so if your position is that, oh, it's just going to be free, then you clearly have not even begun to even think about what you're advocating. You haven't even made the most cursory second thought. And yet people who object to that, people who point out how unworkable it is, how retarded it is, they're anti-empirical. They're the ones who are dogmatic. It's just astounding. I think that there's something to be said that at some level some people are just more susceptible to being emotionally driven. Everybody has reason. You know, the most emotional person in the world, if they're drowning, they will probably, you know, grasp for a rope or try and do something rational to escape. Or if they're starving, they'll do something. But for reasons that aren't entirely clear when it comes to politics, a lot of people are just inclined to be completely irrational. And then to compound it, then when someone is rational, then they have the uh, audacity to claim that they are the ones who are not thinking critically.